The market of New Aurora Station was always bright and noisy, filled with voices of humans, aliens, and machines. Shops lined the long glass corridors, selling food, tools, and colorful goods from 100 worlds. The air smelled of metal, spice, and rain. In the middle of that busy place walked Leora, a thin alien woman with soft blue skin and tired golden eyes. Her clothes were clean but old, her hands rough from work. Beside her walked a small girl, her daughter Aaliyah, with glowing eyes and silver hair that shimmered under the station's lights. Aaliyah tugged her mother's hand. "Mama, can we get bread today?" she asked in a small voice. Leora smiled weakly. "If we have enough credits, my love," she said. They reached a small human grocery store. A sign read, "Mark's General Store, honest deals for everyone." Inside, the shelves were filled with warm bread, milk containers, and fruit from different planets. Leora's stomach ached from hunger. She picked a loaf of bread, a small bottle of milk, and one bright red fruit that reminded her of home. When she reached the counter, the human cashier looked up. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and his name tag said Mark. His face looked tired, but his eyes were kind. He smiled and said softly, "Good afternoon, miss. That'll be 6 credits." Leora reached into her small cloth bag. Her hands trembled as she counted her coins. 1, 2, 3, 4. She stopped. Her heart dropped. She didn't have enough. The scanner beeped red. "Insufficient funds," the AI voice said coldly. The people in the line behind her started to murmur. Some sighed impatiently. 1 or 2 even laughed quietly. Leora felt her face burn with shame. I'm sorry," she whispered. "Please cancel the items." She tried to pick up the bread to return it to the shelf. Her daughter looked up, eyes wide. "Mama, it's okay. I'm not hungry," she said, but her little voice cracked at the end. Mark looked at them both, something in his chest tightening. He had seen hundreds of customers, humans, aliens, traders, thieves, but this moment felt different. He saw not just a poor alien mother, but a person trying to hold her pride. "You don't have to," he started, but Leora shook her head. "Please, I cannot pay," she whispered, trying to smile. "We'll come back another day." Mark froze, staring at the child's empty eyes, and suddenly, he remembered something. Years ago, during the Earth famines, he was the boy at the counter, standing next to his mother when she couldn't pay for food. He remembered how the shopkeeper had shouted, how everyone had stared, and how he had promised himself that he would never let anyone else feel that pain again. His throat felt dry, his hands shook as he looked down at the scanner. Then, slowly, he reached for his own credit card and swiped it across the terminal. The AI voice said, "Purchase approved." Leora blinked. "What are you doing?" she asked, confused. Mark just smiled faintly. "You dropped your card, ma'am," he said softly. "I just found it for you." For a second, Leora didn't understand. Then she realized what he had done. Her lips parted, eyes filling with tears. "You shouldn't have," she whispered, but he gently pushed the grocery bag toward her. "No one leaves my store hungry," he said quietly. Aaliyah gasped softly, her eyes glowing brighter. She looked up at the human cashier with awe. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling like a soft melody. The other customers went silent. The air felt warmer somehow, even under the cold station lights. Mark looked down, pretending to fix the register, but his eyes were wet. He didn't want them to see. Leora stood there, holding the bag of food as if it was made of light. She opened her mouth to say more, but no words came. Finally, she whispered, "May your kindness be remembered among the stars." Mark smiled a little. "Just take care of her," he said, nodding toward the girl. As they left, the door chimed softly. The hum of the station returned, but something had changed. For Leora and Aaliyah, it wasn't just food. It was hope. For Mark, it wasn't just kindness. It was humanity finding its light again. And in that moment, under the glow of neon and stars, one quiet human act reminded the galaxy that even in darkness, the heart can still shine. The next morning, Mark arrived early at the store. The lights flickered on one by one, filling the aisles with a soft glow. He rubbed his tired eyes and tried to focus on work, but his mind kept going back to the alien woman and her little girl. He didn't even know their names, yet he couldn't forget their faces. He tried to convince himself it was nothing, just a small act of kindness, but deep down, It had stirred something he hadn't felt in years. The world outside was harsh, full of greed, distrust, and quiet wars between species. But what he saw in her eyes was pure, fear mixed with dignity, pain mixed with pride. When his coworker Jenny arrived, she noticed his silence. "You okay, boss?" she asked. Mark forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired," he said, but his voice sounded empty. By afternoon, the store grew busy again. Aliens, humans, and droids came and went, scanning their items and hurrying off. But Mark's thoughts kept drifting. He kept glancing toward the door, half expecting the same mother and child to walk in. Hours passed, and they didn't come. As he was closing up, the bell above the door chimed softly. Mark turned and froze. There she was, Leora, holding her daughter's hand. The girl's cheeks were flushed, and both carried shy, uncertain smiles. Mark felt his heart lift. "You're back," he said, trying to sound casual. Leora nodded slowly. "We came to return this," she whispered, holding up a small cloth pouch. "It's the money you spent for us." Mark frowned gently. "I can't take that," he said. "It wasn't about money." Leora's golden eyes shimmered under the lights. "Please," she said softly. "You helped us when no one else would. I cannot keep what I didn't earn." Aaliyah tugged her sleeve, whispering, "Mama, he helped us." Her small voice broke. "Let him help again." Mark chuckled softly, trying to ease the moment. "She's smart," he said. Leora smiled faintly for the first time, and that smile, tired, fragile, but full of gratitude, struck something deep in him. She placed the small pouch on the counter anyway. "On my planet," she said quietly, "when someone saves you, you must return the light. It's our way of keeping the universe in balance." Mark hesitated, then opened the pouch. Inside was not money, but a tiny, glowing crystal. It shimmered faintly with shifting colors, alive, almost breathing. "What is this?" he asked softly. Leora looked down. "It's called a Salas heart," she said. "A gift from our ancestors. It carries warmth and hope. You gave both to us, so now we give this to you." Mark held the crystal carefully. It pulsed once, glowing warmer at his touch. He could feel something. Not heat, but a strange comfort, like a heartbeat that matched his own. Aaliyah smiled brightly. "It likes you," she said, giggling softly. Mark blinked, not knowing what to say. Thank you," he finally whispered. "I'll keep it safe." Leora nodded. "No, don't just keep it. Let it remind you that kindness never fades." He smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who still believes in good things." Leora looked at her daughter and then at him. "I stopped believing a long time ago," she said. "Until yesterday." The words stayed with him long after they left. That night, as the store grew quiet, Mark sat alone at the counter, staring at the glowing crystal. It pulsed gently in the dim light, filling the room with a soft hue of gold and blue. He thought about what she said, about balance and light, about a universe where kindness still mattered. Maybe that was what humanity had lost. Not technology, not power, but heart. He placed the crystal near the register, where he could see it every day. It reminded him that one small act could change everything, even across species. Outside the glass window, the neon signs of New Aurora flickered against the dark sky. Ships flew past like fireflies, carrying millions of souls chasing survival. But in one small store, a single light kept glowing. A human's simple gesture turned into something eternal. And though Mark didn't know it yet, that moment had already begun to ripple through the colony. A story was spreading, of a human who refused to let kindness die. Days turned into weeks, and life at Mark's general store slowly returned to routine. The aisles still filled with chatter and noise, customers still hurried past, and the register still beeped endlessly. But something had changed, not in the store, but in Mark. Every morning, he switched on the lights, looked at the small glowing crystal near the counter, and felt something warm inside him. It was a strange comfort, like the universe whispering that his small act had meant something far bigger. Yet, not everyone saw it that way. One afternoon, the district manager, a stiff human named Hale, arrived for inspection. His sharp eyes noticed the crystal first. "What's that glowing rock?" he asked coldly. Mark smiled faintly. "A gift from a customer." Hale frowned. "This isn't a charity, Mark. We run a business, not a shelter." He tapped his tablet. "And I saw the records. You covered a purchase last week with your own credits. Mark stiffened. It was just a few credits, he said quietly. She couldn't afford food for her child. Hale leaned forward, voice low and bitter. You're not here to fix the galaxy. You're here to sell groceries. He turned toward the exit. Do that again, and you're out. When Hale left, Mark stood there in silence. The words cut deep, but the image of Leora's eyes, full of hope and tears, stayed stronger than the threat. That night, he stared at the crystal again. Its soft light filled the store even after all the lights were off. He whispered softly, maybe helping one life is fixing the galaxy. The next day brought a storm. The weather domes flickered as lightning danced across the station's outer glass. The market was quieter than usual. Only a few brave souls moved through the corridors. Near closing time, the door chimed softly. Mark looked up, and his heart skipped. Leora was back. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a small group of alien women, tired, hungry, holding small children in their arms. Leora looked nervous. I'm sorry, she said softly. They are from my sector. They have nothing left, no credits, no food. Mark froze, glancing toward the door to make sure no manager was watching. He could feel the risk, but he could also see the desperation in their eyes. He swallowed hard. Bring them in, he said quietly. The women hesitated, then stepped forward, whispering thanks in alien tongues. Mark started scanning food quietly, pretending to check out normal customers. He filled bags with bread, fruits, water bottles, and protein packs. He didn't care about the total. His hands moved on instinct, the same instinct that once made humanity great. As he handed the last bag, he noticed one small alien boy staring at him. Why are you doing this? The child asked softly. You're human. Mark knelt down, meeting the boy's bright silver eyes. Because being human, he said gently, means helping when no one else will. The boy blinked, his eyes shining. Then he smiled, the kind of pure, innocent smile that could melt even the coldest world. Leora's lips trembled. They will remember this, she whispered. All of them. Mark shook his head. Don't remember me, he said quietly. Just remember to do the same when you can. She nodded slowly, and for a moment, there was silence. Just the soft hum of the crystal on the counter glowing brighter than ever. When they left, Mark leaned against the wall, exhausted but strangely at peace. He knew the store's system logs would flag his actions. He knew there would be questions, maybe punishment, but deep down, he didn't care. Because that night, something beautiful happened across New Aurora Station. Those same alien women, now fed and grateful, went to the lower sectors, sharing their food with others. They spoke softly of the human cashier who helped them without asking anything. The story spread fast, faster than rumors, faster than light. By the next sunrise, across the colony, messages began to appear on data boards and social feeds. The human who paid, a beacon of old Earth kindness. The cashier who defied the cold. Mark didn't know it yet, but his small act had started something far greater than charity. It had awakened hope. And as he locked the store that night, the glowing crystal pulsed 3 times, brighter than ever before, as if the universe itself was saying, well done. The story of the human cashier spread faster than anyone could have imagined. In a galaxy where kindness was almost forgotten, one small act had become a spark. The feeds on New Aurora Station buzzed with messages. Humans and aliens alike shared the tale in disbelief. Many called it a myth. Others said it was impossible. No human would pay for an alien's food. Some scoffed. But others, the ones who still carried hope in their hearts, whispered, maybe it's true. Mark had no idea how far his name had traveled. He still worked every morning in the same small store, greeting customers, cleaning aisles, and scanning groceries. But now, strange things began to happen. Sometimes, a customer would leave a few extra credits on the counter, saying quietly, for someone who can't afford it. Other times, aliens from distant sectors came just to see him, bowing their heads slightly before buying food. One evening, as he closed up the store, a soft knock came at the door. Mark turned, surprised. Outside stood 2 figures dressed in dark silver uniforms. Members of the Colonial Council. Are you Mark Ellis? One of them asked formally. Mark nodded. Yes, sir. We're here on behalf of the Interspecies Council. The other said. Your name has reached beyond New Aurora. Mark blinked. confused. My name? Yes, the officer said with a small smile. They call you the Lightkeeper, the man who reminded the colonies what humanity means. Mark felt a lump rise in his throat. I'm just a cashier, he said quietly. The officer chuckled softly. Maybe, but you did what entire governments forget to do. You cared. They handed him a sealed data chip. The council invites you to Earth Prime next cycle. They wish to speak with you. Mark stood frozen as they left. His hands shook as he held the small chip. The thought of meeting the council terrified him. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't anyone special. But deep down, he knew something had begun, something he couldn't stop. The next day, when he told Jenny, she almost dropped her scanner. You're kidding me, she gasped. The council? That's huge. Mark tried to laugh it off. They'll probably just fine me for breaking store policy. But Jenny shook her head. No, Mark, people out there are talking about you like you're some kind of legend. He sighed. Legends don't stock shelves. Yet, that night, as he looked at the glowing crystal near the register, he felt the same strange hum. The light shimmered brighter than ever before, illuminating the entire counter. He touched it gently, whispering, "Why me?" The crystal pulsed once, as if it understood. Outside the window, a small crowd had gathered, silent and respectful. Humans, aliens, even droids. All standing together under the neon glow, holding small lights in their hands. Leora stood among them, her daughter Elia beside her. The little girl held a piece of bread high, symbol of hope. They weren't there to worship him. They were there to remember what he had done, and to promise that they would carry it forward. For the first time in years, humans and aliens stood side by side without fear, without walls. Mark stepped outside, nervous and overwhelmed. The crowd turned to him, silent, waiting. He looked around, unsure what to say. Finally, he spoke softly. I didn't do anything special, he said. I just refused to let hunger win. That's all. A voice shouted from the crowd. That's what makes it special. Laughter and tears mixed among them. Someone started clapping, and soon, the sound echoed across the corridor, filling the entire market level with warmth and light. Mark smiled, not because he felt proud, but because he saw something return to the eyes of the people, something ancient and powerful, hope. Later that night, when the market was empty again, he looked out at the stars through the glass ceiling of the station. He realized something simple. Kindness, no matter how small, could travel faster than any ship, reach farther than any signal, and touch hearts across galaxies. He whispered to the stars, maybe being human was never about power, it was about heart. And somewhere in the distant void, among countless worlds, the echo of one man's compassion continued to grow, lighting up the darkness one act at a time. The night before his journey, Mark couldn't sleep. The soft glow of the alien crystal filled his small room above the store, casting golden light on the walls. He sat by the window, staring at the stars beyond New Aurora Station, wondering how a single act of kindness had brought him here. He remembered Leora's face, her trembling hands, and her daughter's smile. Those memories played again and again like a dream he didn't want to end. Outside, ships came and went through the docking bays, their engines glowing like falling comets. Humanity had conquered the stars, but had almost forgotten its heart. Now somehow, a grocery clerk had become the symbol of what humanity once stood for. Early the next morning, he boarded the shuttle to Earth Prime. The passengers around him whispered, recognizing him from news feeds. Some smiled shyly, others bowed slightly. He just nodded politely, trying not to feel overwhelmed. The ship's AI voice announced, arrival to Earth Prime in 2 hours. Mark gazed out the viewport as the blue planet appeared. Home. The world looked peaceful, wrapped in layers of clouds and oceans that shimmered under sunlight. He hadn't seen Earth in 15 years, since he'd left to work in the colonies. When the shuttle landed, representatives from the Interspecies Council were already waiting. They greeted him with quiet respect, leading him through shining corridors filled with banners of unity, human, alien, and hybrid symbols woven together. In the grand hall, thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled the seats. Cameras hovered in the air, recording every second. The council's chairwoman, an elderly human with silver hair named Admiral Vera Lorne, stood and said, Mark Ellis, you have reminded us of something that technology and power cannot give, compassion. Her voice echoed across the chamber. In a time when distrust grows, your small act has crossed worlds, feeding both body and spirit. Mark swallowed hard. I only did what felt right, he said softly, his voice shaking. No one should walk away hungry. Not human, not alien, no one. There was silence for a moment, and then slow applause filled the hall. It wasn't thunderous. It was gentle, respectful, filled with warmth. An alien delegate with crystalline skin stepped forward, her voice like a melody. Your kindness restored faith not just in humanity, but in the balance between species, she said. You have done what laws could not. You've touched hearts. Mark stood still, uncertain what to say. He wasn't used to praise. He only knew shelves, scanners, and quiet days. The chairwoman smiled and approached, holding something small, a medal shaped like a glowing circle surrounding a heartbeat symbol. From the people of 1,000 worlds, we offer this, she said, not as a reward, but as a reminder that the smallest light can guide entire civilizations. She pinned it on his uniform. The hall rose to its feet. Even the alien ambassadors bowed slightly. Tears filled Mark's eyes. He looked up at the stars displayed on the hollow ceiling, whispering to himself, Mom, you'd have laughed if you saw this. That evening, as he left the building, reporters followed, asking questions. Do you think one person can change the galaxy? Mark stopped, smiled faintly, and said, maybe not change it, but one person can remind it what being human means. Leora was watching the live transmission from a small refugee district. She smiled proudly, holding Aaliyah close. You see, my child, she whispered. That is what true strength looks like. The little girl nodded, eyes glowing softly. He made the light grow, she said. And somewhere deep in space, ships carried the broadcast to hundreds of colonies, spreading his message like a living flame. That night, Mark stood alone on Earth's surface, beneath a sky full of stars. The air smelled of sea salt and rain. The waves crashed gently against the shore. He took out the glowing crystal Leora had given him. It shimmered brighter than ever before, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. He whispered, I didn't just feed one child. I fed hope. The crystal pulsed again, brighter, sending a wave of golden light across the horizon. A silent promise that even in the vastness of space, humanity's heart still beat strong. And above him, countless stars seemed to shine just a little brighter, as if the universe itself had heard and agreed. Weeks passed after Mark's return from Earth Prime, and the story of the human cashier refused to fade. What began as a single act of kindness had grown into a movement whispered across stations, colonies, and trade routes. People called it the Lightbearer's Way. On the outer colonies, merchants started leaving food bins marked for those in need. In distant mining worlds, workers shared rations again instead of fighting for them. On ships, passengers exchanged small tokens of hope, crystals, pendants, and letters, all inspired by Mark's simple message. Mark never asked for any of it. He had gone back to his small store on New Aurora, still wiping the counters and greeting customers like before, but the world around him was no longer the same. One morning, as he was restocking shelves, the store door slid open. A tall young man in a mechanic's jacket walked in. His badge read, Nova Trade Academy. Are you Mark Ellis? The man asked with awe. Mark looked up. Depends who's asking, he said with a smile. The young man grinned. My name's Taryn. I started the Light Bearer program at the Academy. We train young volunteers to help feed colonies that struggle. We all learned about you in ethics class. Mark blinked, almost embarrassed. You're teaching my story? Taryn nodded proudly. Your story, and your rule. No one leaves hungry. We've sent over 40 teams across the sector. Mark's throat tightened. He looked down, pretending to arrange fruit crates just to hide the emotion. That's something, he murmured. Taryn hesitated, then pulled a small box from his jacket. Inside was a glowing badge shaped like a tiny star. This is for you, sir, the first light-bearer emblem. Mark took it gently. It shimmered like the crystal Leora had once given him. He whispered, You kids are the real heroes now. Taryn smiled. Only because someone showed us how. That night, after closing, Mark sat by the counter, staring at both the crystal and the new emblem. He thought about how the galaxy had changed, how small gestures had become movements. But he also knew that light always attracts darkness. A message arrived on his comm screen from Admiral Vera Lorne. Mark, it read, the Council has received reports. Some powerful corporations are blocking light-bearer supplies, claiming charity disrupts profit systems. We might need your voice again. Mark sighed, leaning back in his chair. Even hope needs defending, he muttered. The next day, he boarded a transport bound for the Orion trade ring, a massive station run by the richest companies in the quadrant. They had turned kindness into currency. Everything had a price, even water. When he arrived, the guards almost didn't let him through until one recognized him. You're the human cashier, the guard said quietly, eyes softening. My sister got help because of you. Mark smiled faintly. Then let me through, friend. Inside the hall, the trade leaders argued about numbers and logistics. Mark stood silently until they noticed him. One of them sneered. Ah yes, the hero of pity, come to teach us to give everything away? Mark looked at them calmly. No, he said softly. I came to remind you that giving is what made humans great in the first place. The room fell silent. He stepped closer. You measure success in credits. I measure it in smiles. You build ships, but forget who they're meant to carry. People. For a moment, no one spoke. Then one of the alien investors, an elder with shining violet eyes, stood and said, he's right. Slowly, others nodded. The Lightbearer program would be allowed to continue, not as charity, but as unity. When Mark returned home, he found Leora waiting outside the store. Her daughter Aaliyah had grown taller, eyes still bright like starlight. She handed him a small, glowing sphere. The light has reached my homeworld, she said proudly. They sent this to thank you. Mark smiled, looking around at the people now gathering near his store. Humans, aliens, children, all laughing together, sharing food, helping each other. The crystal on his counter pulsed again, brighter than ever, filling the shop with golden light. He whispered softly. It started with one act. And from that light, a movement was born that no force in the galaxy could stop. The Lightbearers, humans and aliens together, carrying forward the message of one simple man who refused to let compassion die. Years passed, and New Aurora Station had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The aisles of Mark's store were still bright and busy, but now the community around it had grown stronger. Humans and aliens shopped side by side, sharing news, gifts, and laughter. Small acts of kindness had spread from station to station, and the movement of Lightbearers now reached across the outer colonies. Mark had aged a little, his hair streaked with silver, his hands rough from years of work, but his heart remained the same, always ready to help, always ready to believe that compassion mattered. One morning, as he swept the floor, the door chimed softly, and in walked a group of children, holding glowing crystals and small baskets of food. Sir, we wanted to help like you did, one boy said shyly. We are the new Lightbearers. Mark smiled, bending down to meet their eyes. You've done better than I could ever do alone, he whispered. You carry the light forward. Outside, Leora and Aaliyah walked by, smiling. Their eyes sparkled as they watched the new generation of humans and aliens learning to care for one another. Mama, they're all helping, Aaliyah said softly. Just like he taught us. Mark felt a lump in his throat, remembering the first day he had helped her and her daughter, how one small act of kindness had grown into something larger than himself, something that could touch worlds. Across the galaxy, stories of the human cashier had become legend, not just on news channels or social feeds, but in the hearts of beings who had witnessed hope restored. Children told their parents of a human who refused to let hunger win, and adults told their children how small acts could create waves that changed societies. In a distant classroom on a mining colony, a young girl held a glowing pendant and whispered, I want to be a light bearer. Her teacher nodded. One day, you will remind the galaxy that kindness is stronger than fear. Mark never sought recognition, yet every day he saw it, not in medals, not in titles, but in the smiles of the people he had touched, in the laughter of children who once knew hunger, in the unity between species who had learned to trust. One quiet evening, Mark stood outside the store, staring at the stars. The crystal on his counter pulsed softly, glowing brighter than the neon lights of New Aurora. He thought about Leora, Aaliyah, the countless strangers he had helped, and the young Lightbearers now spreading hope across the stars. He whispered to himself, It only took one heart to remind the galaxy what it means to be human. A soft wind from the docking bay brushed his face, carrying distant laughter. The smell of food and life filled the air, and somewhere, in a far-off colony, the story of the human cashier was being told once again, inspiring someone else to act. Mark turned back toward his store, a quiet smile on his face. He had started as one man, standing behind a counter, scanning groceries and counting credits. But now, his simple act had become a legacy, teaching countless worlds that hope, compassion, and courage can survive even in the coldest corners of space. And somewhere deep among the stars, one small glowing crystal pulsed like a heartbeat, sending a message across the galaxy. Humanity, at its best, shines brighter than any star. The legend of the human cashier would never fade, not because of fame or power, but because it carried something far greater, the proof that even one ordinary person can change worlds. And under the endless sky, New Aurora Station glimmered with life, laughter, and light, a beacon to all who still believed in kindness. Mark smiled quietly, knowing that the galaxy would remember, and hope would never die.